You've heard of the concentration camps, the brutal prison systems described in every World War II documentary that showed the darkest side of humanity. You know about the horrific treatment of prisoners, the starvation, the torture, the mass graves that revealed the true face of evil. In previous documentaries, we've explored the atrocities of war and the systems of cruelty that defined the darkest chapters of the 1940s. But these cover just one portion of what actually happened to prisoners of war. But did you know that German soldiers, captured by the British, expected to be starved and beaten, only to be handed hot tea and treated according to law? So unexpected that these battle-hardened soldiers couldn't believe it was real. Thousands of them were told by their own officers that British captivity meant certain death. So how could Nazi propaganda be so completely wrong? What did the British actually do that shocked German prisoners? And why would Britain treat enemy soldiers with dignity when no one would have blamed them for revenge? All this and more we'll uncover in this investigation into one of World War II's most unexpected stories. Welcome. Before we reveal what German POWs really experienced in British camps, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment below telling me, if you captured enemy soldiers who fought for a regime that bombed your cities, how would you treat them? Because what the British did will challenge everything you think you know. Let's begin. October 1944. Western Front, Normandy. Feldwebel Hans Müller, 23 years old, crouched in a shell crater while Allied artillery pounded his position. His unit had been decimated. Officers were dead. Supply lines were cut. The Wehrmacht was collapsing all around him, and in his breast pocket, he carried a folded propaganda leaflet issued by his commanding officer just 3 days earlier. The message was clear, printed in bold Gothic letters. British captivity means death. They will starve you. They will beat you. The Geneva Convention is meaningless paper. Better to die fighting than beg for mercy from the English. Müller had seen the images, sketches of skeletal prisoners chained in dark cellars, stories of POWs forced into labor until they dropped dead, warnings that surrender meant slow, agonizing death by starvation. His officers had been explicit during the final briefings before the collapse. The British hate you. They want revenge for bombing of London. If you surrender, you will not survive. Müller believed it. Every German soldier believed it. Why wouldn't they? Their own government had shown them what happened to prisoners. Why would the British be any different? So when British soldiers surrounded his position on October 18th, 1944, Müller expected to die. Hands raised, weapons dropped, zip-tied with canvas strips. Müller and 31 other captured soldiers were loaded onto a transport lorry. The journey to England took 3 days. Cold, uncomfortable, silent. Every man in that truck knew what was coming. Starvation, beatings, maybe execution. The propaganda had been too consistent, too detailed to be lies. As the truck rumbled through the English countryside toward the processing camp at Kempton Park, just west of London, Müller memorized his mother's address. He wanted to remember it when they interrogated him. He wanted to die with her name on his lips. The truck stopped at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Gravel crunched under boots. The doors opened. What happened next changed everything. A British sergeant approached, not with a baton, not with dogs, with a clipboard and a dented thermos. "Tea, while we sort the paperwork," the sergeant said in accented German. "You've had a long ride." Müller stared at the tin cup being offered to him. Steam rose into the cold October air. The sergeant poured without ceremony, moved down the line. 32 cups filled. No one drank at first. They waited for the trick, for the poison, for the moment when the British would laugh and knock the cups from their hands. It didn't come. The sergeant just waited, bored, checking names on his list. "Drink it before it gets cold," he said. "We've got a lot to process today." One soldier, braver or more desperate than the rest, took a sip. He didn't collapse, didn't scream, just swallowed. Then another drank, then another. Müller lifted the cup to his lips. The tea was bitter, overbrewed, poured from a chipped enamel pot that had probably served 1,000 men before him. But it was warm, it was real, and it was the first thing that contradicted everything he'd been told. The processing tent still smelled of canvas and disinfectant. Inside, British clerks sat at folding tables with typewriters and filing systems. They were registered by name, not number. A clerk, bored and methodical, asked Muller to spell his mother's surname for the contact file. He did haltingly, expecting a slap for the delay. The clerk just nodded and moved on. Personal effects were cataloged, not confiscated. Wedding rings, photographs, a harmonica, all tagged, stored, and receipted. In the corner of the hall, an older prisoner sat with his boots off, feet wrapped in gauze by a British orderly who worked without comment. Muller watched. He had been trained to see enemies. He saw a man doing a job. The medical officer was thorough, but not cruel. Lice check, dental inspection, tuberculosis screening, standard procedure. No beatings, no humiliation. When they offered tea again at the barracks door, Muller drank it without hesitation this time. That night, lying on a thin but clean mattress in Hut 7, Bed 14, covered by a wool British Army blanket, Hans Muller faced a terrifying thought. If they lied about the tea, what else did they lie about? If British captivity wasn't the death sentence his officers promised, what else had been a lie? The wonder weapons? The inevitable victory? The subhuman nature of the enemy? He fell asleep clutching that thought like a grenade. And in the morning, when they served breakfast, boiled potatoes, tinned meat, bread with margarine, the grenade exploded. Everything he'd been taught was wrong. It wasn't sentiment, it was policy. Britain's POW system wasn't built on compassion. It was built on cold, calculated strategy. Directives from the War Office were explicit. The goals, in order priority. Security, stable camps reduce escape attempts and unrest. Intelligence, cooperative prisoners provide operational details. Reciprocity, treat POWs well. German camps might do the same for captured British soldiers. Standards, civilized nations don't abandon principle under pressure. Morality was on the list, but it was item 4. Over 400,000 German POWs would pass through British custody by war's end. Quarterly Red Cross inspections documented everything. Caloric intake met or exceeded Geneva Convention minimums, often around 2,800 to 3,000 calories daily for working prisoners. Mortality rates remained extraordinarily low, especially compared to Eastern Front camps where prisoners died by the thousands. This wasn't charity. It was discipline. It was restraining coded as doctrine, and it worked. A German-speaking liaison explained the camp rules in flat bureaucratic sentences. Work is mandatory. Cooperation is rewarded. Escape attempts are punished with solitary confinement. No beatings, no summary courts. One commandant was known to say, "The barbed wire is the punishment. We don't need to add to it." Muller was assigned to Hut 7, Bed 14. The mattress was thin but clean. A wool blanket, British Army issue, weighted folded at the foot. Then came the first real meal. Boiled potatoes. Tinned meat. Bread with margarine. Wheat coffee. It wasn't luxury, but it was enough. Some men ate slowly, tasting every bite as if testing for poison. Others ate in silence, tears tracking down their faces as they turned toward the wall. No one spoke about the tea, but everyone remembered it. By November 1944, Muller was part of a 60-man work detail assigned to a dairy farm in Somerset. The work was real. Mucking stalls, repairing fences, hauling hay bales during autumn harvest. Hours were long, 6 to 8 hours daily, but within Geneva Convention limits. Supervision was light. The farmer, a man named Dalton, spoke little and expected competence. You break it, you fix it. You slack off, you're back to camp. No threats, just standards. Muller found himself taking pride in the work. The fences he mended stayed mended. The gates he rehung didn't sag. Extra rations came on heavy work days. An additional slice of bread. Sometimes cheese. Honest work for honest treatment. It was a contract he hadn't expected to sign. Dalton's wife left tea on the fence post most mornings. Not for friendship, just efficiency. Keeps the men from dragging their feet before lunch. But after 3 weeks, she added biscuits. After 2 months, Mueller and two others were invited to eat Sunday dinner in the kitchen, while Dalton listened to the BBC. No guards, no locks, just the unspoken deal. You're trusted until you're not. Mueller never considered running. Where would he go? Back to a war that was already lost? He fixed the tractor instead. When it stalled the next time, Dalton handed him the toolbox without comment. Trust, it turned out, could be earned in grease and bent metal. In January 1945, Mueller caught pneumonia. The camp hospital was clean, heated, staffed by a British doctor and two nurses who treated him exactly as they treated the guards. Antibiotics, warm compresses, soup delivered twice daily. The doctor, a man nearing 60, too old for frontline service, checked Mueller's lungs with a stethoscope and made notes in a ledger that recorded every prisoner's health with the same bureaucratic care as a schoolteacher's attendance book. No speeches, no sermons, just medicine. When Mueller thanked him, the doctor shrugged. You're a patient. I'm a physician. That's the job. Mueller returned to the farm 2 weeks later, 5 pounds heavier, carrying a small respect he couldn't quite name. For the first time since his capture, he felt like a human being, not a prisoner. The camp chaplain, Church of England, mild-mannered with thinning hair, organized a Christmas Eve service. Attendance was optional. Mueller went. So did Mosa Hut 7. The chaplain read from Luke. A German prisoner played accordion. Someone produced a harmonica. Silent Night was sung in 2 languages. The harmony was clumsy but earnest. Afterward, the guards distributed cigarettes and extra tea. No propaganda. No speeches about brotherhood of man. Just cigarettes, biscuits, and a moment where the war felt smaller than the room. One guard, young, barely 20, stood at the back and applauded softly when the music ended. Mueller noticed. He filed it away in the growing list of things that didn't match what he'd been taught. Prisoners were allowed to write home once a month. Letters were censored, but lightly. Mueller wrote to his mother in careful, neutral sentences. I am well. The work is fair. We are treated according to law. Do not believe what you hear about England. It is not what they told us. His letter reached her in March 1945, passed through Red Cross channels. She shared it with neighbors. The propaganda minister's promises began to crack, one envelope at a time. By summer, some German civilians were writing back. If you are alive and fed, perhaps surrender is not the end we feared. Information, it turned out, traveled both ways, and each letter home was a small act of rebellion against the lies that had sent millions to die. The camp library held 400 books, donated secondhand, multilingual. Mueller borrowed an English grammar primer, then a novel by Dickens, which he read slowly, dictionary in hand. Some prisoners organized a chess club. Others formed a choir. One man, an engineer before the war, taught mechanical drawing in the evenings. Guards occasionally attended. Curious. These were small freedoms, but they signaled something larger. You are still human. You still have agency. The barbed wire remained. The guards remained. But within the wire, there was room to grow. In February 1945, a guard lost his temper during a work detail and shoved a prisoner who dropped a crate. The guard was reprimanded the same day, removed from duty for a week. The camp commandant made the announcement at evening roll call. Standards applied to all of us. No elaboration. No apology tour. Just accountability. Mueller filed the moment away. In his own army, such an incident would have been ignored, or the prisoner would have been punished for clumsiness. Here, the system bent toward fairness. Not perfectly, but consistently. If you made it this far, drop a comment below. What surprised you most about this story? We read every one. By spring 1945, restrictions had loosened. Work details no longer required armed escorts. Mueller and others walked unguarded to the farm each morning, a 2-mile trek through fields still wet with dew. Dalton handed him the tractor keys one morning without comment. Plow the north field. I'll check it this afternoon. No supervision. No test. Just a job. Mueller plowed straight rows, checked the fuel, parked the tractor in the barn. When Dalton inspected the work, he nodded once. Good. That was all. But Muller felt something shift inside him, something close to pride. During the harvest, several prisoners volunteered extra hours, not for rewards, just because the work mattered, and leaving it unfinished felt wrong. Competence earned respect. Respect earned trust. Trust became the foundation for something neither side had expected: mutual regard. Muller sat on his bunk one evening in April 1945, holding the chipped enamel cup that had become his personal mug. The war was ending. Everyone knew it. Germany was collapsing. The Eastern Front had fallen. Berlin was surrounded. The propaganda machine had lied about everything. The wonder weapons that would turn the tide? Lies. The inevitable German victory? Lies. The subhuman enemies who would torture prisoners? The biggest lie of all. If they lied about the British starving prisoners, what else had been false? Muller had spent 6 months in captivity. He'd been fed, treated fairly, given medical care, allowed to work with dignity, trusted with a tractor. He'd been treated better as a prisoner of war than as a soldier in his own army. The realization was devastating. Everything he'd fought for, everything he'd believed, built on lies. Years later, decades later, Muller would tell an interviewer, "I went into that camp expecting to die. I came out questioning everything I'd been taught, not because someone preached to me, because I was treated like a man." That was the pivot. Not a lecture, not a leaflet, not propaganda about democracy or freedom, just consistency, restraint, the steady application of civilized standards. It planted a seed, and seeds, given time, grow. The British hadn't won Muller's loyalty through speeches. They'd won it through tea, through fair work, through medical care, through accountability. They'd shown him that civilization wasn't just a word. It was a choice you made every single day, even when no one would blame you for choosing differently. The war in Europe ended in May 1945. Repatriation began slowly. Logistics, vetting, transportation. Many POWs weren't sent home until 1946 or 1947. Some volunteered to stay temporarily, continuing farm and reconstruction work, while Germany rebuilt. Some never left. Muller returned to Germany in late 1946. He found his mother alive, his town in ruins, his country trying to remember what it had been before the madness. But he carried something back with him, something more valuable than his personal effects, more lasting than the wool blanket they let him keep. He carried the knowledge that there was another way. Muller kept in touch with Dalton for 30 years. Christmas cards, brief letters, updates about harvests and grandchildren. He never forgot the tea, or the blanket, or the moment a British sergeant handed him a cup and said, "You've had a long ride." In 1974, Muller visited England. He met Dalton at the old farm. The fence posts he'd repaired were still standing. The tractor he'd fixed still ran. They drank tea. They talked about crops and weather and grandchildren. They didn't talk about the war. They didn't need to. The war had ended 29 years earlier. But the lesson it taught hadn't ended. It had just changed form. Civilization, Muller realized, wasn't about never having enemies. It was about what you did when you had every excuse to abandon principle. Britain didn't treat German POWs well because Germans deserved it. They did it because they deserved to remain who they were. Victory without vengeance. Order without cruelty. Strength measured not by the pain you inflict, but by the restraint you maintain when no one would blame you for inflicting it. It would have been easy, so easy, to let German prisoners suffer, to reduce rations, to turn a blind eye to abuse, to say, "They bombed London. They started this war. They deserve whatever they get." No one would have blamed Britain for choosing cruelty, but they chose something harder. They chose discipline. They chose standards. They chose to remain civilized even when civilization was under attack. Over 400,000 German POWs passed through British custody. Mortality rate, less than 1%. Escape attempts, remarkably few. Cooperation with intelligence services, extensive. Red Cross violations, virtually none. The system worked, not because it was kind, because it was smart. Civilization, is not the absence of conflict. It's what you do when conflict gives you permission to abandon principle. It's the tea you pour for an enemy who expected poison. It's the medical care you give to a soldier who fought against you. It's the trust you extend when you have every reason to withhold it. It's the moment you choose to remain who you are, even when no one would blame you for becoming something worse. That's the test of civilization. Not how you treat your friends, but how you treat your enemies when you have absolute power over them. Britain passed that test, and in doing so, they didn't just win a war. They proved what they were fighting for in the first place. Muller carried that lesson home in 1946, wrapped in a wool blanket and the memory of bitter tea. The barbed wire came down. The guards went home. The camps were dismantled, but the cup remained, not the physical cup. That was returned to the British Army quartermaster like everything else. But the memory of it, the symbolism of it, the moment when an enemy offered warmth instead of cruelty, and everything changed. So I'll leave you with this. In a world that constantly gives you permission to be cruel, to be vengeful, to treat enemies as less than human, what will you choose? Will you choose the easy path of revenge, or will you choose the harder path of principle? Because that choice, made millions of times by millions of people, is what determines whether civilization survives. The barbed wire will always exist. Conflict will always exist. Enemies will always exist. The question is, what kind of person will you be when you have power over them? If this story changed how you see humanity in wartime, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Comment right now. Would you have had the strength to show restraint if your cities were being bombed? And check out the videos on your screen, because history is full of moments that test what we're really made of. Keep questioning, keep learning, and remember, civilization is a choice. Until next time.